The Wssl Master Bus Compressor is a stereo compressor that's part of the Wssl SSL 4000 collection. It's modeled after the center section compressor that was part of all the 4000 E and G series consoles that were made. That was actually a quad compressor, but most people just used it for stereo, as we're going to use today. What was cool about that compressor was it was mounted right in the middle of the console, right by the master fader, and I'm not sure if it used the same VCAs that the master fader used for automation, but it certainly sounded so good that putting it in the circuit didn't compromise the music, so you didn't feel like there was a sonic penalty when you turned on the bus compressor, and it's sitting right there already patched in. Very tempting to use. I'm also going to compare it to the Smart Research C2, which is a hardware compressor that's modeled after the original SSL stereo bus compressor. Let's check it out. So let's start by adding the bus compressor to our mix. I'm going to go to the master fader. I have the option of going to Dynamics SSL Comp as a multi-channel plugin or as a multi-mono plugin. The difference is a stereo plugin is reacting to the left and right channels, perhaps mixing them together so that the stereo mix is being looked at as a whole, while if you use the multi-mono, then you've got an independent left channel compressor and an independent right channel compressor. And I kind of like that. It makes the mix a little wider, and I know the purists say, oh, well, your stereo image is going to shift around. If you have a big tom hit off to one side, it's going to pull the center over a little bit. Yep, it does. But it also just feels wider and cooler, so I like it. We're going to use that one for today. This is what the SSL bus compressor looks like, both in real life and in the plugin. It looks very similar. You have the usual compressor controls, threshold, determining at what volume the compression action starts, makeup gain knob to make up for any gain lost during the compression process, an attack knob, setting the attack time, how fast the compressor starts its compressing action. Amazingly good about this compressor is the attack always sounds natural no matter what you do. Even crazy fast times like the 0.1 second still sound really good on drums. It doesn't wreck things. A lot of compressors just put a very unnatural front end on stuff, and this one doesn't do that. It's great. A release time knob, which goes from 0.1 second to auto, program dependent, which can be very fast on something like drums or really slow on the end, fade out at the end of a mix. It's pretty natural and a great setting. Got the ratio knob, 2, 4, and 10 to 1 are our only selections. And we've got a fade out feature. The SSL console had a built-in fade feature where you could fade out your mix automatically, and that you can set like a 10-second fade out time and fade out your mix by clicking this fade button. We also have an in and out switch and the analog simulation on-off switch, which sounds very good. Let's take a listen to what it does. I've got a drum mix going, which is a typical application for this kind of compressor, and see what we got. Default settings. Bypass. So you can see it's bringing the attack, transient out on the drum, which is cool, and kind of leveling all the drums, which makes them sound maybe a little bit more in your face. They're more present. We can load some presets here like pumping. Pumping's 10 to 1 ratio. Slow attack, get lots of click out of there, and then a fast release, so we hear the room come way up. Mastering. Mastering taking advantage of the really nice auto setting, so it's not too obvious on an overall mix. Overhead ambience. Attack time is destroying the snare transient that gets in the overheads and sometimes makes the snare too loud. Kind of an ugly transient coming through the overhead mics. This is probably a bit much here, but you get the idea. And then punch. Similar to the earlier pumping, but we only have 2 to 1 ratio. And then we have Chris Lord Algae preset, his stereo mastering finalizer. bypass. Notice that Chris set the makeup gain at 0, so although he has some compression going on, which is reducing the volume of his stereo mix, he's not making that up by turning up this knob, which he could. Alright, let's play with our fade feature here before we do our hardware comparison. Fade feature, set this to 10 seconds, and when I get to the end of my song, I'm ready to fade out, I just click that button. Click. And it does a nice little fade out. Audio is off. I can fade back in by clicking it again. And then once more to take the fade feature out. Analog simulation button. And compressor in and out. And again, when the compressor's out, the modeling of the analog circuitry is still going on, so you get some of the analog harmonic distortion and grit even when you're bypassed. You have to bypass it up here to completely take it out of the circuit. Alright, let's compare it to the Smart C2. I've got a picture of that here. That's what the Smart C2 looks like, and you see it's got the same controls: threshold, ratio, attack, release, makeup, and release even has a couple more settings, but they're all the same settings plus a couple more. Even the auto release is there. And there's a button over here labeled Crush, which adds a parallel path of kind of highly compressed mid-rangey stuff to the mix. We'll listen to that, but not something you use every day. Alright, so let's hear our drums through the SSL, and then we'll hear it through the hardware version, the Smart C2. C2. We'll switch back. I very carefully match the levels and the settings using a signal generator test tone to make sure that the onset of compression and the level was the same. So hopefully all we're hearing is the difference between the hardware version and the software version. One more time. Switch. So, I don't know if you can hear the difference if you're watching this as a download, but it's pretty subtle, and the C2 has maybe a little more depth or is a little less in your face. Software version a little more in your face here, you know, as far as the click on the attack of the kick drum and stuff. But boy, it's the compression action's really close, and sound quality, I think the software version maybe preserving the sound quality of the mix a little bit better than a trip out the 192 interfaces in and outs at 44.1. I know I like the sound of the 192 a lot better at 96K. I feel like that sounds better, but we're at 44.1 right here for this test. So there might be a little bit of loss there, but they're really close. They're really, really close. Close enough that I won't use the Smart Research anymore? Maybe. I've done some shootouts, and it's close enough to where, you know, if I needed things to be slightly more distant or deep, you know, the hardware version might be the way to go. Or if I need to pull things forward, they're a little bit dark and need a tiny bit more snap, software version. But boy, you kind of flip a coin and go with that one. Anyway, that's our tour of the Master Bus Compressor. Have fun.